I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd end up writing something like this, but after what happened during my PhD, it feels like the only way to make sense of everything is to put it all into words. For years I stayed silent, swallowing my anger, trying to convince myself that I was imagining things, that if I just worked harder, things would get better. They didn't. They got worse, until my entire career was dangling over a cliff because of the very person who was supposed to guide me. And in the end, I decided that if he was going to try to destroy me, then the best revenge would be to destroy the carefully built empire he had created on the backs of people like me. When I first joined Dr. Halvorson's lab, I was thrilled. This was the man who had written the paper that had inspired me to go into systems biology in the first place. He was well known. He had grants flowing in from every possible source. He spoke at conferences with the kind of authority that made rooms go silent, and everyone in the department treated him like he was untouchable. To be accepted into his lab felt like winning the lottery. My project was ambitious, designing a CRISPR-based reporter that would glow under specific regulatory RNA conditions. It was the kind of project that, if successful, could make my career. He smiled when I pitched it and told me, "It's yours. Run with it." The first year, things were fine. He kept his distance, and I worked like a machine. I barely slept, but I was so excited every time the data looked promising. Then the cracks started to show. He was generous with promises but stingy with delivery. He promised me I'd present at a big conference and then let me stand by a poster in a back hallway while he gave the invited talk. He promised me co-authorship on papers when I did heavy lifting for others, and then my name got shoved into the acknowledgments instead. When I pushed back, he would smile and say, "Be patient, your time will come." When the first solid data came out of my project, I thought my time had arrived. The results were clean, exciting, and replicable. I poured everything into writing the manuscript, carefully logging every experiment, documenting code, photographing my notebook pages like they were precious artifacts. I was proud of my work, but the closer I got to submitting the draft, the more Halvorson hovered. He wanted changes that twisted the narrative, that made my design seem like it had been optimized by others in the lab. He suggested swapping the author order so his visiting postdoc could get first credit for grant optics. I was furious but also scared, so I compromised, telling myself that the paper mattered more than the name order, that at least I'd be on it. And then, one morning, a colleague at another university congratulated me on my preprint. I had no idea what they were talking about. I clicked the link they sent me and my blood went cold. There was my project, my data, my figures, even my code posted online under a flashy title, but with the visiting postdoc listed as first author. My name was third, and the method section was word for word lifted from my draft, down to the exact variable names in my scripts. They had even used the same stock photo of a petri dish I had dropped into a presentation slide. The only real change was that now my work was being framed as something optimized by others, with Halvorson taking the glory as senior author. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. My hands were shaking as I printed the preprint and laid it side by side with my manuscript draft. It was unmistakable. My work had been stolen. Minutes later, I got a text from Halvorson. "Great news," he wrote. "I posted the preprint to help with the grant renewal. We'll sort out author order before journal submission. Keep your head down and get more data." I can't describe the clarity of the anger that settled over me in that moment. No more compromises. No more patience. He had crossed a line, and if he wanted a war, I would give him one. But my war wouldn't be loud. It would be quiet, methodical, and relentless. The first thing I did was start building a folder. Not just a digital one, but a fortress of evidence. I scanned every page of my lab notebook, making sure a printed newspaper date was visible in each photo so no one could claim I faked the timeline. I exported every draft of my manuscript as PDFs to lock in metadata. I pulled my Git commit logs to show when I had written each piece of code. I saved every email where he promised me credit or acknowledged my role. I started recording every meeting with him on my phone legal in my state, and I only communicated with him through emails that included the phrase "for clarity. Can you confirm?" Slowly, I built a mountain of boring, undeniable proof. But proof alone wasn't enough. I needed leverage, so I started pulling at threads. The preprint had cited a federal grant, which meant the data management had to follow strict rules. I contacted the microscopy facility we had used and asked for the logs tied to our project. They showed something interesting. My imaging sessions were recorded and stored properly, while the visiting postdocs files had been uploaded from a personal drive and then deleted. I contacted the vendor for one of our reagents and got confirmation that the production date didn't even match the timeline described in the preprint. Piece by piece, I gathered inconsistencies that would show that not only had my work been misattributed, but parts of the preprint were outright inaccurate. I also reached out to an external collaborator, Dr. Iyer, who had been tangentially involved in our consortium. I asked her, carefully, if she could replicate my design independently. She did, and she sent me a photo of the glowing plate along with a simple message. Replicated. Your method works. Keep your emails. That message became my anchor. When Halvorsen called a lab meeting to celebrate the preprint, I finally spoke up. He handed out pastries and made a big show about teamwork. I raised my hand and said, calmly, that the preprint reproduced my work without proper attribution and that I intended to file an authorship dispute through the department's official policy. The room went silent. He dismissed the meeting and pulled me into his office. He lowered his voice and told me I was committing career suicide, that no committee would side with a student over his record. I stared him in the eye and said, "We'll see." Then I walked out, shaking so hard I could barely stand. But I knew there was no going back. Filing the formal complaint was terrifying. I handed over my folder, organized, indexed, with every receipt labeled. The Integrity Office opened a preliminary assessment. They pulled lab server backups and found my drafts sitting in an old _stuff folder with earlier timestamps than the preprint. They interviewed me, then the postdoc, then Halvorsen. He called me disgruntled. I called him specific. Every time he tried to handwave, I had a dated file. Every time he claimed collaborative iteration, I had tracked changes showing entire paragraphs lifted from my draft. The deeper they looked, the worse it got for him. While the investigation churned, I protected my work externally. I uploaded my protocol and code to a public repository that generates DOIs. That way, there was a timestamped record linking my name directly to the method. With Dr. Iyer, I co-wrote a short correspondence paper describing the design and validation. It was dry, but it was undeniable. Once it was published, the world now had a citable artifact tying the method to me, not just to a preprint Halvorsen controlled. Halvorsen fought back. He told me I was sabotaging the lab. He tried to reassign me to desk work, tried to isolate me. He warned me that I'd never get a postdoc with this reputation. But I had stopped being afraid. Every threat he made, I documented. Every manipulative email, I printed. I CC'd the department chair on everything. Slowly, the tide turned. The committee's report was clinical and devastating. It concluded that my contributions had been inadequately attributed, that the preprint contained inaccuracies, and that corrections were required. It recommended mandatory training for him and a monitoring plan for his lab. They stopped just short of using the word misconduct, but everyone knew what it meant. The journal where the manuscript had been submitted froze the submission until authorship was corrected. Halvorsen was forced to list me as first author, with my contributions spelled out clearly. The preprint was updated with a note correcting attribution. It wasn't the apology I wanted, but it was proof. The fallout didn't stop there. Because the preprint had cited a federal grant, the discrepancies triggered an audit. The funding agency began looking at data management practices across his lab. They found deleted files, odd authorship matrices, and a pattern of credit manipulation that went back years. Former students and postdocs started coming forward, sharing stories of their own work being minimized or stolen. What had happened to me wasn't an isolated incident. It was his way of operating. For years he had gotten away with it because no one wanted to be the student who risked their career. I had been that student, and suddenly the dam had broken. By the time I defended my dissertation, he was a shadow of the powerful man I had first met. He sat in the back during my defense, silent, and when the committee congratulated me, he didn't even look me in the eye. For the first time, he addressed me as Dr. Scott. It felt like reclaiming something I had almost lost. In the end, My revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. I didn't scream, I didn't throw things, I didn't destroy him in a single moment of glory. My revenge was slow, boring, methodical. It was in the emails that said, "For clarity." It was in the scanned notebook pages. It was in the patience to let the bureaucracy grind him down with his own arrogance. He had built an empire on the assumption that no one would ever stand up to him. I pulled one thread, and the whole thing began to unravel. Now I'm in a new lab, working under a mentor who values credit and transparency. I tell every student I meet the same thing. Keep your receipts. Write things down. Protect your work. Don't let anyone convince you that you're imagining things when you know the truth. Because sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's just surviving, succeeding, and knowing that the person who tried to erase you will forever have a stain next to their name, while yours shines brighter than they ever intended. That's my story. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And if you've ever been in a situation where someone tried to take credit for your work, I hope it reminds you that you're not powerless. You can fight back, even if the fight is long, even if it feels impossible. In the end, the truth has a way of catching up. It did for him, and it saved me,